Hello, and welcome to Reel Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I'm pleased to have with me back on the show once again my friend Jason Aguayo. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Hello, Angela.
And Jason is back for one of our special episodes looking at the work of a female filmmaker. And this time we are looking at the work of Joan Micklin Silver. Her years are 1935 to 2020, so she passed away fairly recently. And Joan Micklin Silver, this was actually one of my suggestions. I got into her films actually during COVID. She had a collection of films on the Criterion Channel, and I started watching them, and was really surprised that I was not more familiar with her work. She, considering she, started directing films in the 70s and basically ended, about a year before she passed, so in 1999, and that I really wasn't that familiar with her films. But she worked primarily as an independent filmmaker, putting with a company she had with her husband. And so she worked outside of the studio system, which which I think is one of the reasons she's not as well known. But really interesting filmmaker. She's the child of Russian Jewish immigrants, which often plays a key aspect in a lot of her films as she explores immigrant culture as well as Jewish culture. And we're going to be talking about four of her films today that we wanted to highlight, although she did others and also did some TV. And I know, Jason, you weren't really familiar with her films before I suggested her. And then, of course, you did a deep dive, as you always do, and looked at all of her work. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about her.
Yes, I guess thank you for the introduction. I'd heard of one film, but wasn't familiar with her name. As you indicated, she was born in 1935 in the Midwest, actually Nebraska, and from, like you said, Russian Jewish immigrants, and so that certainly informed her career. Like I said, she got married and was interested in directing, but wasn't finding work in feature films. And it was actually her husband who helped finance the first movie. And so, yeah, I think the opportunities for women were pretty limited at the time. And she had done some, shorts and educational type films, but just didn't have the opportunity for a feature. So certainly glad of the suggestion. Really enjoyed going through her filmography and looking forward to chatting about that today.
Yeah, she actually said in an interview that she was told when she started trying to shop films around or try to get a film made, feature films are very expensive to mount and distribute. And when women directors are one more problem we don't need. That's what she was told by a studio executive. So she was lucky in a way that she had a husband who was willing to finance her films, as you mentioned. And so that's how she was able to get her first film made, which is our first film we're going to discuss. Probably my favorite in a way of her films, 1975's Hester Street, which is also on the National Film Registry, Library of Congress, for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. This film tells the story of Jewish immigrants who come to the Lower East Side of New York City in 1896 from Eastern Europe and live on Hester Street in Manhattan. It follows a character named Yankel, who first comes to the U.S. and wants to quickly assimilate into American culture, so he changes his name to Jake, and he starts to have an affair with a woman before he brings over his wife and son from Europe. His wife is Gittel, played by the fantastic Carol Kane, who I'm a huge fan of her work. And here she is in a rare starring role. Carol Kane is a character actress who always gets to play quirky side characters, but this is one of her rare starring roles. And Gittel, her character is a traditional Jewish wife. She still wears a headscarf. She doesn't know a word of English, and this causes a lot of tension with her and Jake, formerly Yankel, and he continues to have his affair as well with his American mistress. So causes a lot of tension between them, and there's some abuse that happens, and we kind of follow their story. I think the film is really centered on Carol Kane's Gittel, who we really sympathize with and get to know as a character. Joan Micklin Silver became more known for doing essentially romantic comedies. Most of her films sort of fall into that vein, or a lot of her films are sort of in that vein. This one is not. It's more of a drama, I would say. It has a really interesting, beautiful look. She kind of shot it almost like an old photograph from the 1800s, which I also love about it. But I really feel like this is the film. You think after you watch this, oh, like, why didn't Carol Kane get more roles? But I think she kind of got typecast, actually, as kind of this Jewish character. The irony being, though, although that she didn't know a word of Yiddish, so she had to actually, learn the language to play the character, assimilate herself into that. She was just, a New Yorker, really. But because of this film, it didn't lead to a lot of starring roles like she hoped. Curious to hear your thoughts about the film, Jason.
Well, yes, certainly enjoyed the film. Just talking about Joan trying to get movies made, in addition to her being a female director, the content of her movies weren't necessarily things that studios thought were going to be big hits, and this one was, pretty niche in the fact that it was this, very Jewish immigrant experience, but that was something that her ancestry had come from, so she wanted to tell that story. Yes, funny thing about Carol Kane, Micklin had seen her in a Canadian production and thought she was a foreign actress and that she would be too expensive to get for Hester Street. But then it turned out, like you said, she lived right in New York, and so she was in the neighborhood, learned Yiddish, got coached. That was the other thing, is the film is mostly in Yiddish and subtitled. So the idea of that being commercially successful seemed pretty far out. But as you said, Carol Kane got an actress nomination for this movie, and it did end up being successful. Joan's husband, Raphael, did gather funds to help finance the film, and this one actually made money. And
Oh, did it? Okay.
to finance actually the next feature that we're going to talk about, but certainly a great experience. And I think going back to the rom-com, I think some of them have that elements. I almost would characterize them more as family dramas. Like
Yeah, that's a
all of
good
them
point.
have something to do with realistic kind of family issues. And I kind of went through all of the features, including some of the TV ones, and a lot of those especially were really dealing with family issues, but usually had some sort of female protagonist and was really
Yes.
focusing on the experience of the woman more so than the men in the story.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd say, maybe I think because her most famous film, which we'll talk about later, Crossing Delancey, is probably the most kind of rom-comish. I think that's why maybe she got known for that. But you're right. I think family dramas, family-centered movies, that's kind of the through line more than anything. And that's great. I didn't realize it was successful because she did try to shop it to studios first, and nobody wanted it. As you said, they were like, a movie about Jewish immigrants, mostly in Yiddish, no thank you. And it was actually Cassavetes who gave her some tips, John Cassavetes, on how to basically distribute it independently and get people to show it. And he said, if you get some good reviews, it will take off, and it did. So that's great. And I think it's a great film. I think it's absolutely a four-star film. It has aged really well. I've seen it a couple of times now, and it's absolutely fantastic and really shows why Carol Kane, I am just a huge fan of hers. Her film Between the Temples was on my top 10 from last year, and she just continues to be one of our underrated actresses in America. So, yeah.
One more element I think that does propagate through a lot of these films is this sort of tension between traditionalism and modernism, and you see that in this movie, you know, Jake Yankel is really becoming Americanized in terms of dress, shaving the beard and everything. And Gittel is sort of the representation of the traditional role. I had seen recently Fiddler on the Roof on stage, so it was great to see
Mm.
some of these like traditional elements. But even in the later movies, Crossing Delancey, particularly, there's that tension between the traditional as well as modern.
Oh yeah, definitely in Crossing Delancey, it's there too. Yeah, which I love. I did my thesis on immigration in films, and it's interesting that this one, Hester Street, didn't really come up much. Is one that was talked about, but it's actually a great portrayal of the immigrant experience in America and that kind of tension over acculturation and assimilation. So yeah. So let's move on to our next film, which I'm super excited to talk about as well.
Right. So, next film, 1977's Between the Lines. And as I said, Hester Street was successful and she was able to finance Between the Lines. There was a TV movie, Bernice Bobs Her Hair, in between with Shelley Duvall that had been based on F. Scott Fitzgerald. But Joan Micklin had written for the Village Voice. After she and her husband moved from the Midwest to New York, she started writing for a little paper, and this is based on another guy's book about writing at a little paper. So this one is set in Boston, however, rather than New York, and there is this independent newspaper, the Main Line, that has a group of 20 somethings who are all working for this paper. So we meet these various characters who are writers of various topics, photographers as well as ad agents. Working in Boston, and the looming threat here is the idea that there is going to be a buyout of the paper. So they're really struggling with the idea of being their independent voice and then maybe going under corporate influence. And weirdly, I'm not sure how much of a plot other than that buyout there is in the movie. It's more a bunch of quirky characters. I watched it with my wife, and she sort of mentioned the 30 something, although this is sort of a 20 something with different quirky characters that get into different situations. But most of them are very entertaining, and it's a bunch of great actors. Some, early in their career. But I definitely enjoyed it. Watching again recently, it was a lot of fun. I picked out some things, some of the music and other scenes. So, love to hear what you have to think.
Yeah, I love this movie. Of course, I'm a former journalist, so when I saw it, I thought, gosh, how have I not seen this movie? Because I think of myself as someone who, a lot of former reporters or even current reporters tend to, seek out good movies about being a reporter. And this one, of course, portraying an alternative paper was very dear to my heart. And the threat of the corporate takeover, but also these kind of, as you mentioned, quirky characters in their 20s. John Hurd, who actually worked with her in several films, is absolutely fantastic here, as is Jeff Goldblum. So there's a shout out for all the Jeff Goldblum fans out here. If you haven't seen this movie, he's great in this. He is not shockingly one of the more quirky. He's the music critic on the staff and a very quirky character. And Lindsay Krause, a great actress who went on to do some David Mamet films, is the photographer on the staff. So some great actors. And like you said, it's not a plot kind of movie. It's not like, I mean, there's some subplots mainly involving the characters, but it's really more of I would call it character study type of movie. It's about the characters and I love just the interaction. I felt like she really captured what it was like. I worked for an independent weekly newspaper when I was in college and in the West Valley, and she really captured that spirit of just these people who are making like cruddy money, who just really believe in what they're doing, writing outside of a corporate environment and trying to do their best and going for the stories that nobody else is interested or nobody else is willing to take on. So, I mean, that she captured that really, really well. I thought it was one of the best portrayals of that I've seen in a movie, and most authentic. So, and the fact that she wrote for the Village Voice, as you mentioned, I think lends credence to that. I think she obviously drew on that for this movie.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Jeff Goldblum, and it reminds me of, and I actually heard someone reference this movie as being Altman-esque in terms of
Hmm.
the conglomeration of all these characters and a lot of dialogue that's overlapping and going
It's
on.
probably why I like it so much because I love Robert Altman movies and I love all
Right.
the characters and they're just talking and people are talking over one another. Like I like that element and I could see that being Altman-esque. But I do feel like there's an authenticity here to the way the newspaper is portrayed, the cruddiness of the room they're in, everything about it just felt very authentic to me. It's not
Well,
some
and
fancy
span-
office.
spanning, they're talking about corporate takeover, but when they reflect on the early years, it was still during Vietnam, and they were really, had this passionate, idealistic sort of voice, and now they're transitioning to this new era where it's, yeah, more about the money and advertising.
Yeah.
Interesting.
If only they knew in 77 the way media would go, if they
Yeah.
they could they're rolling over in their graves all in 2025. So,
Ahead of its time. I just a quick note about Bruno Kirby, his little mousy character that is trying to get into trouble and does in a way, just reflecting the many cool characters that are going on in between the
oh yeah,
lines.
Bruno Kirby, another great character actor in this movie. It's just full of great character actors who, I mean, John Hurd became a movie star, but I think this is before he actually was. So yeah, and then there's a big gap here between the lines and crossing Delancey. So
Yeah,
if
let
you want to
me
talk about
mention a
what
little
she
bit.
did there, yeah.
So right after, well, after Between the Lines, he did Chilly Scenes of Winter, and so that one had John Hurd, and that one had some elements that the studios didn't like. They put it out in with a different title and a different ending, so that actually was her biggest flop. And so some part of the thinking is that that kind of kept her from getting features for a while. She did do some TV stuff, How to Be a Perfect Person in Just 3 Days, and the one I brought up to you, the Finnegan Begin Again. But it wasn't, it was, yeah, another 9 years before she got to do another feature.
Which is why we
Now,
talk about on She Directs, women don't get second chances very often, especially in the old days. Like you had a flop, because their first couple films were fairly successful, but then Chili Scenes of Winter was a flop, so then she doesn't get to work for almost a decade.
right, right. And even then, so this is Crossing to Lansing, 1988, and it is a lighter kind of context, some romance, although it is focused on a woman who, comes from a Jewish upbringing, but she's moved uptown and she's caught in the works at a bookstore, and she's really sort of aspiring to be part of this, literary world. But she visits her grandmother a lot, who's in the old neighborhood, who's trying to get her to get married. So she's kind of bridging that traditional Jewish upbringing with this new modern woman. So the stars Amy Irving, and Joan Micklin did get Amy Irving, and she went to visit her to, talk about the script and everything. But she had to admit that she didn't have financing for this film. So it was 9 years later, but she still didn't have financing. And at the time, Amy Irving was married to Steven Spielberg, who
Mm.
read the script and said, "Wait, this is a great script. You don't have any financing for this." So she tells a story how Spielberg says, "Well, have you taken it to Warner Brothers?" And she said, "Well, I don't know anybody at Warner Brothers." And so Spielberg says, "Well, let me go talk to Warner Brothers." So you could make the case that this may not have even gotten made if it wasn't for Steven Spielberg jumping in there. But great, again, focused on a woman, struggling between these two worlds. The Bubby character, her grandmother, hires a matchmaker to match her up with somebody, and she picks out this pickle merchant in the neighborhood, played by Peter Riegert, who had been in Chilly Scenes of Winter. So he's like this idealist, working class, romantic guy, but she has her eye on this author who's hanging.
Waspy guy.
What's that?
A waspy guy. Yeah, not a Jewish guy, right?
Right, right, right. So this sort of launches this thing where she uh, sort of admires this guy, but isn't attracted to him and wants the other world. But then, after about the time she starts setting him up with one of her girlfriends, she starts to realize, well, maybe she does have an interest in him. But then sees him dipping his hands into the pickle barrel and gets. So she's really struggling between these two worlds. Love to hear what you have to say about
Oh
crossing the.
yeah, I love this. And I liked the pickle guy. I like Peter Riegert in this. I think I would totally marry the pickle guy over the waspy author, but of course I love pickles. So I was like, "Hey, what's wrong with a guy who has a pickle business? Everyone likes pickles. It's a successful business." But she's very turned off by this guy at first because it reminds her too much of where she came from. She's trying to get away from kind of the Jewish working class background that she grew up in, and she's enamored with this book world because she works at this bookshop. And so I like that exploration of it, although I really felt for the pickle guy, because he's really taken with her, and she kind of doesn't give the guy a break at the beginning. So she's very, oh, he's going to smell like pickles all the time. Again, me, I'm like, and what's the problem with that? I love pickles. Anyway, so I guess if you don't like pickles, then it's not going to be a great setup. But Amy Irving is absolutely charming in this, just a great performance. And of course, I loved her Bubby, her grandmother, the Jewish grandmother. It is this sort of like old fashioned, oh, which guy is she going to end up with? It's a rom-com in that way, but it has these wonderful extra layers because of the kind of Jewish American identity aspects and that this idea, also class issues as well. It's not just the Jewish thing. It's also she's trying to kind of get into a higher class type atmosphere. There's some people that don't love kind of the way it wraps up. Maybe it's too conventional for them, but I think it's a very charming film. And I think perhaps one of her most successful films, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and this was the one that I had actually heard of. I hadn't seen it, but I was familiar with the
Yeah.
title. And yeah, it does have more of a conventional kind of ending. It almost strains believability that the guy would hang around despite her abuse, but
That was the
he,
part I think some people might be like, really? Is he gonna, this is a smart, good-looking guy. He could probably find someone else.
right,
She's so amazing. He's gonna keep
yeah.
kind of hanging around despite this woman giving him the cold shoulder. But the film was a modest success. It made some money, got some awards, and I think one of the things that I have to point out is the music by the Roches, a band that I love, and Susie Roches in the film plays a friend of Amy Irving's character too. So I always like to give a shout out to my indie band. So I needed to mention that. But so it's good music as well. But I think this one is probably her most well-known film, as you said, partially because it has Amy Irving, who was at the time a pretty big star. So it was kind of as you mentioned, she's married to Steven Spielberg, and so it was a kind of a coup for Joan Micklin Silver to get her. So definitely probably the lightest of the films, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly true.
Yeah. So this was, let's see, let's get back to my notes here. So that's in the 80s, and now
1988, yeah.
we're gonna jump another
Right.
decade, but maybe you
So,
could talk about what she did between
yeah.
88 and 99. Yeah.
So, probably the weirdest one. I think I was aware of this movie, but strange to see that she had directed it, Loverboy, with uh, Dempsey,
Patrick
where
Dempsey. Oh yeah, I
Patrick
forgot she
Dempsey.
directed that.
Yeah, so that is a weird one. So that was pretty popular in 1989, I think. But then did some TV stuff, a woman on the inside about women in prison, Big Girls Don't Cry, another family drama. A couple of interesting, A Private Matter. This is Sissy Spacek, and this is in the 60s, and she's considering an abortion, which she has to flee to Europe for. Um, then in the presence of mine enemies, so this is another very Jewish. This is World War II, and so the Jews are in this neighborhood and they're getting compressed and really more of a depressing thing. Before 1998's A Fish in the Bathtub, and you're going
Yeah.
to tell me about that.
Her last major feature film. I have to mention Private Matter, though, is actually a very good movie as well. And I have seen that one. And, she made a lot of good movies in between this decade. It's just that they, again, even though Crossing Delancey was a hit, she didn't, I guess Loverboy was probably her studio movie she got a chance to make. And then She made that and probably thought, okay, that wasn't very much fun. So I want to continue
Yeah, I
making
mean,
movies
in
about
terms
women.
of most everything has significant messages, except for, I don't know.
Loverboy. I kind of feel like that was her studio movie. The studio said,
Yeah,
okay, you Crossing Delancey was a hit. You can make this now. And she thought, oh, okay, I'll do it so I can keep making movies, but not much fun.
yeah.
So we'll move on to the last film, A Fish in the Bathtub, probably her least well-known film. I don't even know sure if this got distribution because I had never heard of it. Thankfully, I have Criterion Channel and they have this movie, 1998 or 99. I had 99 down. But anyway, it stars Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira, the great legendary comedy duo, the parents of Ben Stiller, for those who are unfamiliar. They're a great comedy duo, and they star as a married couple in real life. And his character, Sam, is pushing his wife to the edge because he's super annoying. I just have to put it out there, like, Jerry Stiller's character in this is a very annoying character. He decides to purchase a fish and literally put it in the bathtub at home, and they can't use their bathtub anymore because he's obsessed with this fish. So they start fighting, and she just finally says, after decades of marriage, I'm done. I can't handle this guy anymore. So she moves in with her son, by a young Mark Ruffalo, who is just beleaguered now. Like his parents are fighting, his mom has moved in with him. And then he's having kind of issues in his own marriage, and he starts to get tempted by this woman that he meets through work as a real estate agent. So he's kind of himself deciding, whether he wants to. I mean, there's not really anything wrong with his marriage. I think he's just getting tempted by, a very attractive woman. And so they and then Molly, the character played by Ann Mira, starts to see another man, which then drives Jerry Stiller's character completely up the wall. Now his wife of many decades is seeing another man, so he goes even more berserk. So this is like one of those comedies where a lot of the characters are like yelling at each other a lot. So there's a lot of yelling, and nobody yells like Jerry Stiller. Let's face it. I mean, if any, he just goes. If you've seen any episodes of Seinfeld, he goes from like 0 to 1,000 really fast. So you'll either really find this movie annoying, or you'll find it very charming and funny, which I did. I actually was kind of like, why did this get such bad? Because it actually got fairly bad reviews when you look at, the reviews when it came out. It did have a few reviews, not a lot on Rotten Tomatoes, and a lot of them were pretty negative. And maybe it is because the character's a little grating, but I found it very charming.
Yeah. Yeah, so it is tough, his character, but you get to see Jerry Stiller star in a movie, which is crazy.
I know him and Ann Mira they're always like side characters, right? Especially in Ben Stiller's movies when he got to directing, but you never get to see the movies about them. So,
And they had really been married for 45 years at this point. I guess why didn't Ben play the son? It's like he was too popular then, so they had to settle for Mark Ruffalo. But eventually things come around, and it does have more of a happy ending. I finished it last night and had a better feeling about it. It is challenging sometimes, the fighting that they do. A couple of notes. Raphael Silver, who was Joan's husband, was the executive producer on 4 of her movies. The 4 that we reviewed, weirdly, he was a producer on he had directed a couple of movies on his own. But they were both writer and directors. This one, yeah, again, it's just more of suburbs of New York, but family drama and looking at real life issues. Certainly there is a Jewish element. Ann Mira had converted from Catholicism to Judaism when they married, and that was true in the film. I enjoyed it. Not one a lot of people have seen, and it certainly wasn't successful, but worth a watch.
yeah, definitely worth a watch, especially if you love Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira, which I do. And you want to see Mark Ruffalo in an early role before he was famous. So yeah, I love talking about Joan Micklin Silver's work. Very sad that she's no longer with us, but glad that her films at least are getting some attention on places like Criterion Channel. I think some of these films you can find other places. Pretty sure Crossing Delancey and Between the Lines are available other places. Fish in the
I watched
Bathtub,
them all
pretty hard.
free online, so I was able to find a lot of movies.
Okay.
Couple
Even though
here,
you have Criteria now.
Invisible Child, 99, Charms of an Easy Life, and Hunger Point was her last feature, both TV. That was 2003, before her passing in 2020.
Okay, well, as always, have a great day and movies. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you very much, Jason, for being on the show. Have a great day and great movies. Bye bye.